Hey, it's me, Ryan Wilson, and this ain't no Will Brinson podcast. It's the Brady Quinn football show, and we're going to talk a little NFL mock draft. Brady, how happy are you to see me instead of Will Brinson, those hair plugs that he calls real hair?
Is that what are we calling those things hair plugs now?
Oh, Debo has leaned so far into the hair plug thing that people actually start to believe it, and Brinson has to answer social media questions about where he gets hair plugs and how they get to look so good.
He probably takes it from his facial hair and he just throws it up top. That's most likely where they take it from. They graph it from his cheeks and his neck because he's such a hairy human being. Maybe his back too. You know, seems like the type of guy that has a lot of back hair.
Yeah, he doesn't. He looks like he probably has hair all over the place. As someone who is bald, that's the only thing I'm jealous about Will of. All right, enough of that. We're already sidetracked. Brady Quinn football show. I'm so pumped to talk to Brady about draft stuff because I don't get to see Brady a lot this time of year. First things first, got to plug the YouTube channel, youtube.com/pick6. Subscribe, hit that like button for a chance to win a Brinson Sucks hat of your choice. Brady Quinn has already made his request, so he will be getting one as well. We have, as I look to my left, there's a box full of hats that are going to be sent to Debo, and Debo will be passing them out to lucky winners or unlucky winners, as it might be. In that same vein, if you look up there right above Brady Quinn's head, there's a Pick 6 sale. And if you put your old phone on the QR code there, save that link because starting Thursday through Monday, there will be 25% off all items at the CBS store, including sweet Pick 6 merch. And Brady, we all have me, Breach, Prince, and all got our Pick 6 sweatshirts. If you had to guess, what sizes do you think the three of us ordered for our Pick 6 sweatshirts, which all fit perfectly, by the way?
Okay, so I'll start off with the Breach. He's got to be the smallest size, right? So
he's 5'6", he informed us.
So a small. I mean, I would think a small probably fits Breach. He's a slight build. He goes to Britney Spears concerts. I would think a small probably fits him, right?
Okay, go through all of them. I'll tell you.
Okay, Brinson.
5'8", he says. I don't know if he's 5'8", but he says he is.
I would say a medium, and that's only because he's a slightly taller than Breach, but he also, I think, packs on a little bit more weight. You know, he'd call this time of year bulk season for him, even though it doesn't work out. But that's like what people do to get away with, like, putting on weight during the holidays. They just go, oh, it's bulk season, bro. I'm just working out. So he probably wears a medium. Who else we got? I mean, Ryan, I would say, I feel like you're pretty tall. What are you, 6 foot, 6'1"?
Oh, look at the Debo. You hear that? Clip that. I'm 5'10", but I'll take it, man.
Okay.
6'1"? What?
I just remember, I haven't seen you in years, I feels like.
Yeah.
I feel like
I'm getting older and shorter.
You look like a giant next to Breach and Brinson. That's the thing.
Breach, Brinson, Prisco. Everyone looks like a giant next to Prisco wears a double XL, by the way. And that's not because of obviously height. That's width. So if Prisco gets one, it's a double XL. You probably would wear then at 5'10". I'm stuck between a medium and a large, but maybe a large because you know it's going to shrink because of the type of material. Plus, you're taller. Yeah, you're a little more jacked. You probably actually work out, run, all that kind of stuff. Who else we got?
And Debo. What do you think Debo wears? 6 feet.
Debo's taller, and I feel like he likes to layer, so he doesn't want us too tight. So I think a medium for Debo.
Yeah, I think easy 0 for 4, Debo. Is that right?
0 for 4 for Brady right there.
Wow. Was I like sizing down too much?
Yeah. No.
I mean, I don't know how these things fit.
Yeah, Breach wears a medium. Breach and I had mediums. Okay. Brinson gets a large for the reasons you described, bulk season. And Debo,
so everyone's up a size.
Debo, who's 6 feet and probably weighs, I'm going to guess 155, says he wears a large, which is like something my 14-year-old would do just so he can layer. I think Debo a medium probably looks great on Debo.
Yeah, a little baggy. It's a little baggy. I'm not going to lie, but
what size do you wear, Ryan?
A medium.
Okay, all right, that's surprising. I would have thought I had everyone kind of handicapped up one. So
I tell you what, man, you made my Christmas by saying 6 feet 6'1". That is a huge win for Wilson. So thank you there, man. You're the guy who makes does the programs for the college kids, does their height and weight, and they get to the Senior Bowl and they're 3 inches shorter than what everyone thought they were.
Man, I was having this conversation with Reggie, and I like tried to go back and look this up, but I couldn't find it online. He said he was listed at USC as 6'3". I was like, what? Now, the thing about Reggie.
Year before you. I had that draft. I'm going to go look at the draft guide. I have the 06 draft guide. I'll go look it up for you.
Draft before me, same high school class as me, though.
Okay.
So I tried to recruit him to Notre Dame. Obviously, their pitch and you know, briefcases were better than Notre Dame's. But I digress. He looks like he's taller than he is because he's got such long legs. So like you think he's short because he's like 6 foot, but like he looks way taller than that because he's got no torso. He's like all legs, which is weird for like a dude who's 6 foot.
Yeah, and Debo has it on the screen if you're watching on YouTube. He's listed at 6'2" from back at the USC.
Correct. I think he told me they put in like in their program either early on or at some point that he was like 6'3", which
that's awesome.
I mean, back then in college, like you could kind of finagle some of that stuff. Like now it's like straight legit. They have like NFL scouts come in and measure you because they don't want to have to, do it again when you get older.
No, exactly. That's right. All right, let's get into this thing, Brady. We start with quarterbacks. That seems like what we always do. And you're a quarterback, so what better place to start? So every week on Monday, me, you, and Danny Cannell talk about my latest mock draft. And to your credit, you and Danny haven't really yelled at me like you and Pete used to. So that's progress.
I never yelled. I'm just always trying to get you fired up to mix in some more things instead of like 1 or 2 changes each week. Like if I were you right now, I'd be doing a lot more trade scenarios because now you can get away with these crazy things and people will look at it. And then once we get to draft time, then you get a little more topical stuff. You get a little more information. There's some medical stuff that starts to float out. So you get a better idea of some of these guys that we got projected in the first round who aren't going to be purely because of character stuff or medical stuff, which, we won't find out until February, March of next year.
Yeah. And to your credit, you make suggestions and usually I end up doing them for us to talk about. So maybe I'll do trades next time. Why not? What do we got to lose? I mean, the only issue is that the draft order gets sort of reset every Sunday night, Monday night, but that's not a huge jump there. All right, so the quarterbacks. In the most recent mock, which you talked about on Monday's HQ, and we'll start again here, I had the Texans at number 4 taking Matt Corral. At 18, I had the Steelers. On your suggestion, Brady taking Kenny Pickett. And then at 27, the Lions and Carson Strong. So Debo put this in the rundown, and it's a good question because this is sort of how I do the math when trying to most positions, but especially quarterbacks. If you're comparing Matt Corral to last year's first-round picks, the 5 guys that went in the first round last year, where does he come in?
So I got to be honest with you. I hate having this discussion, and here's why.
Great question, Debo.
Well, no. Look, I'm not the type of guy that like goes and has a ranking system for the quarterbacks. So, typically how it works is, right, a team's going to have their rating system based on whatever criteria. They'll have a weighted average on the things they prioritize, and they'll come out with a grade. And that grade will determine whether or not that player is a first-round pick, second-round pick, but also they can compare it back to previous years.
Right.
Like, that's not necessarily what the business I'm end up doing, and in part because it doesn't matter, only because, like the Texans, if you look at their situation, what their team needs are, the type of offense that they run, it's very different than, for example, the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, when you're looking at who they're prioritizing as a quarterback, it's probably not so much dependent upon, well, what's their ranking, right? Maybe with the exception of like Trevor Lawrence, where no matter who was number 1, you take Trevor Lawrence. He's going to be a good system fit. But in this year's draft, it's much more dependent upon like the eye of the beholder. Which team says, like, I really like that guy. Like, you've got Matt Corral, Kenny Pickett, Carson Strong in the first round, as you said. No Malik Willis, no Sam Howell. Now, I haven't broken down enough of Malik Willis this year from the little bit that I've seen. I think you see the upside. You see the strong arm. You see his athleticism. But you also see the inconsistency. You see the inaccuracy at times. Those are things that I think would concern most teams because you don't usually get more accurate when you go into the NFL. You can if you're like Josh Allen, and really when you go back and watch the tape, you go, okay, it's not so much a product of like ball placement, things like that. It's the fact they don't have a number 1 wide receiver who could separate, who can get open, who can do the things he needs. Then he explodes like last year. This year, not as good, but still. So that's kind of how I look at it. I would say if I was looking at Matt Corral compared to last year's class, I'd put him ahead of Zach Wilson. I'd put him ahead of, I'm trying to think, probably Trey Lance.
Yeah.
So I probably would have had him 4th in that.
And they're
group.
all similar-ish type players, maybe more Corral and Trey Lance than Zach Wilson,
right.
But those are the skill sets you're looking at.
Yeah, and I would probably put Kenny Pickett ahead of Matt Corral. Like, I like Kenny Pickett the best of everyone in class. I've said this 1,000 times to you. He reminds me a lot of Ben Roethlisberger coming out of Miami of Ohio. And from what I remember from Ben early in his career, he's not as big as he is. But when you look at the way he's able to maneuver and create plays, take chunks downfield, he's athletic enough to do some things. it's a natural fit for me to kind of compare him to Ben. So I like him the best. I think Corral's the second best. I like Sam Howell too. Like, I think the heart he's shown this year, the way he's played, I know some people feel like he took a step back or he didn't, meet expectations, but he had a really uphill battle considering what they lost last year and when he came back. I mean, he's one of the better running quarterbacks too in this class. And I don't know, it's not like a speed dynamic thing. It's just like more of a willingness to scramble or to take off from time to time to go get those tough yards.
Let me ask you this about Sam Howell in particular, because I just haven't seen it. He doesn't do it for me. That doesn't mean he's not going to be good. And that's another thing you have to guard against, because you don't like someone in college doesn't mean they're not going to be a good player. So you have to keep that in the back of your mind. But I've talked to teams that feel sort of the same way I do. And it starts with this question. Brady, you would know better than me by a mile. His footwork sucks. Like, his footwork's gotten better since last year. Is that a function of just being one read? I got to run for my life. Is that a bigger issue? And is that something that you can fix, quote unquote, over the next 2 or 3 years if you get to the NFL?
It's definitely something you can fix. I think footwork is the probably single most thing you can fix with a quarterback going from college to the NFL or at any point in time in his career. That's the one thing you can drill into you, whether it's the way you drop, handle the pocket, all those things. I mean, there's enough drill work and things you can do to get that in. The upper body mechanics, if you've got a hitch in your throw, like Sam Hartman, for example, from Wake Forest, when I watch him, it seems like there's a little bit of a hitch in there. Those are a lot harder to get out at this point in time. I mean, I was in Denver with Tim Tebow. They could, no matter who tried to work with them, Josh McDaniels, Ben McDaniels, John Elway, it didn't matter. He wasn't going to be able to get it out of his system at that point. He even went to Tom House, and they couldn't get it out, back when I believe he finished in Philly in the preseason. So it's just, you've already had so many reps. When the live bullets come, it's hard to get rid of that. So I think the footwork thing doesn't bother me as much. And I'll be honest with you. I think all these guys lack proper footwork at times. They're all in the shotgun. It's hard to demonstrate proper footwork when you're playing in shotgun. So I don't really even use that as a knock. I think the one thing you look for is kind of that like base and how they go to throw. Are they able to establish that base efficiently and quickly to get a throw off? One guy who's a young guy that does this, but he obviously has some footwork things he could work on, is Caleb Williams at Oklahoma. Like, he's one of the more fascinating quarterbacks to watch, because when he drops back, man, he kind of sits back there and he's like a really good athlete. But man, watch his base. Like, he gets those feet dug in and he could just whip that thing when he goes to throw. So he's going to be an interesting prospect when, his time comes here in a couple of years. But the base is the more bigger thing, and how they get to that base from their drops is what matters to me.
Okay. No, that's great. And that's good to hear. You mentioned Malik Willis. I wanted to go back to him for a second too, because I watched him over the summer, and honestly, he looked like a day 3 pick to me, a guy with huge upside. You talk about the arm strength, the athleticism, he can run. He's a much better runner probably than any other quarterback in this draft class, maybe except Matt Corral. I saw him play in person against Syracuse, which has a pretty good defense, and he was good, not great. And one of the things when I talk about these quarterbacks as first-round picks, top 10, top 15 guys, you want them to be able to elevate the players around them. And in large part, he's doing that at Liberty. But that Ole Miss game gave me a lot of concerns, because, you're playing against SEC dudes. It's not the Georgia defense, but this is an SEC defense. And you were completely and wholly outmatched in much the same way that Jordan Love felt against that LSU team a few years ago. And I came away thinking, okay, he's not a first-round pick right now. Maybe if something happens, maybe he can grow into that. But I'm not trying to convince myself that he's a first-round pick. Where do you come down on projected ability based on athleticism and all this other stuff, and where the kid actually is?
So I love that you asked this question, because I think it goes back to that initial conversation of comparing a quarterback this year to last year's draft class. It really comes down to that team. If that team's going to take him and put him in right away, then they're setting him up to fail. Right? Like, he's not that player. Like, right. Very similar to kind of Trey Lance, who looked great at a lower level, but hadn't really played in about 2 years besides one exhibition game. And, now gets thrusted into the number 3 overall pick for the 49ers. There's no way in hell he was going to be ready to play by that point, So I think that's what I see with him is, if a team's taking him, they have a plan for him. And they're probably sitting him behind a veteran and letting him grow and learn while they hone in on some of those raw skills and let him get comfortable with the offense, what he's seeing out there. You use the example of Jordan Love. I'll use the example of Zach Wilson. After seeing a cupcake schedule that he played his final year at BYU, the one toughest game they played was arguably Coastal Carolina. And that's not even a Power 5 team, but that was a team that was pretty blitz pressure heavy. was an athletic team, and he struggled. You know, that was probably his worst game of the season his last year at BYU. So that's another example of, like, when you're a lower level team and you play one of those big boys up in the Power Five and you see them struggle, it's like, well, that's kind of what you're going to get then, because he's not ready for that yet. And I think that's where he fits in, at least for me. And so I'm not saying he couldn't go in the first round, because he's got those ability, like he's got the arm, he's got the athleticism, he's got those sorts of things. So it really comes down to the team that's looking at him and saying, like, what's our plan for him, and how much do we love who Malik Willis is as a player, leader, person, all that, because that's going to play a big role in it too.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Especially, God, we don't talk about this enough, but I bring it up every time we talk about it. Fit's so incredibly important. So if you're talking about him going to the Saints, for example, and you let him sit for a year behind whoever the quarterback is next year, that makes a lot more sense than put him on the Lions team, where he's probably going to have very little chance for success anytime in the next few years. We talked about your guy, Kenny Pickett. We'll talk about Carson Strong as well before we take a break here. I said on HQ yesterday, and this ain't going to change, I don't think. There are some NFL teams legitimately concerned about that knee, which is too bad. That knee injury goes back to high school. I think he had a cleanup procedure before the start of the season. Week one, they beat Cal in a game in which he played really well. And the issue is, when you watch him play, and Danny Cannell talked about this in HQ as well, he's not mobile. He's actually relatively athletic when he's healthy, but he's a pocket passer, and that's just reality of it. I don't know if that's injury or otherwise, but he also throws a lot with his upper body, because I don't think he has the strength in his knee to be able to push off consistently. And, you know, if it ain't going to get better, it ain't going to get better. So where do you come down on Carson Strong as a NFL prospect, regardless of the knee? And then how does that weigh into how you might move forward if you're a GM?
Well, I mean, I would say it's hard coming into the NFL right now, not being a quarterback who's got some sort of, mobility or ability to create or something, right? You know, all the quarterbacks we've discussed so far have that in this draft class. When we talk about Corral, Willis, Kenny Pickett, even Sam Howell, Strong doesn't have that. He's not that bad of an athlete, right? Like, it's always relative terms, relative to what we're talking about compared to other guys. I mean, not like a civilian, he's clearly more accurate. I mean, we saw Tom Brady on Monday Night Football at 42 years old kind of hurdle a guy and then slide for a first down. So, like, don't get it twisted. Tom would probably beat you playing one-on-one. So Carson Strong's a better athlete than we give him credit. But for the standards of what you need to have at the NFL level, that's the concern is, if you went to the team like the Lions, now their offensive line isn't atrocious, but it's probably in the bottom half of the league. That's going to be a problem. And especially when you've got a wide receiver core or guys to throw to that outside of TJ Hawkinson and maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, there's not too many guys who are going to be able to separate. Maybe Swift, too, if you find him in a matchup out of the backfield. So that's a problem. And that's where I kind of look at it and say, he might end up being a second-round pick purely because of that lack of mobility and probably the medical as well on the knee. But when you turn it on, man, he makes probably some of the best throws next to at least Pickett from what I've seen this year, as far as just downfield accuracy, putting it in tight spots, NFL caliber throws, throwing outside the numbers, which you're going to be asked to do at that level.
Yeah, I loved Carson Strong over the summer, and I was hoping that his knee, and hopefully maybe something will happen, it'll be better. But yeah, I had very few complaints with how he played coming into this season, and it's just a matter of, you're not going to make a huge investment in a guy if you don't know if you can count on him. But I mean, Kyle Trask went bottom in the second round. He's better than Kyle Trask, and I don't even think it's close. It's just a matter of the health. In terms of, you mentioned him second round, third round, wherever he ends up, we'll find out. All right, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about some more prospects that Brady Quinn loves as we are almost at the end of here of this college football season. All right, back. Pick Six Podcast. No Will Brinson. Win for everybody. Happy early Thanksgiving present to us all. All right, Brady, some of your favorite prospects in this 2022 class. Let's start with wide receiver. And it feels like there's been, over the last 2 or 3 years, just the wide receiver, and probably based on high school offenses and that bleeding into these college offenses, the wide receivers just taken off in terms of guys who are just game changers. Who are some guys that you like? Tell me about a few of those guys.
Well, I gave you a ton to pick from. I think the first thing I just say is this. It's a grassroots deal where, you're seeing kids at younger ages, and especially when you look at how many 3 wide receiver, 4 wide receiver, even 5 wide receiver sets at times teams will utilize, there's just more opportunity. There's more opportunity to get paid, more opportunity to get the football, more opportunity for all of that, and especially as much as, teams are throwing the football. So I think at a younger age now, and especially with the 7-on-7 leagues, flag football leagues, you're seeing players who don't want to play running back quite as much, don't want to play maybe even defense as much. They want to hone in on those hand-eye coordination skills and play wide receiver. And that's starting to trickle up now where you're seeing more and more developed, talented guys. I mean, take the Big Ten, for example. David Bell, who just came out, he's a Blitnikoff finalist, to go along with Jahan Dotson, somehow who wasn't, by the way. But like those two guys in particular have been absolutely clutch the entire year for Purdue and for Penn State. I mean, Dotson's smaller in size, but electric. It's hard to get a hand on him. He can help out in the return game too. So he's a special cat. He should be somewhere in the 4.4s. I don't know how much lower than that. David Bell, probably same thing. Probably the greatest crime I've seen so far this year in college football is none of the Ohio State wide receivers were finalists for the Blitnikoff, which you probably could make a case all three should have been up for it. Now, Garrett Wilson, to me, is the most dynamic of that group when looking at the way they utilize him on jet sweeps, downfield passes, and just the ability to take a short pass turning into something. And Olave is that like precise route runner, sure-handed, just past David Boston for most career receiving touchdowns at Ohio State. He hasn't dropped a reception in the red zone his entire career. So he's kind of clutch in that sense. His footwork is impeccable. Jackson Smith and Jigba's the other wide receiver, but he's not draft eligible yet. Jaden Reed at Michigan State, he's been clutch for them this year, kind of Peyton Thor's go-to guy. Chris Bell at Minnesota, he's got more size, more downfield ability. Maybe not the variety of routes that you want to run, but I mean, that's just in the Big Ten. And you might as well throw Jameson Williams in there at Bama because he came from Ohio State. He was supposed to be a part of that mix, but chose to go to Alabama, where he now is also a Blitnikoff finalist. So, I mean, you can go through this list of wide receivers, and to me, I think what it's going to come down to is Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave. Those three will probably be fighting for that top spot. It might come down to 40 time and how teams prioritize that, or it might just come down to what they're looking for in a wide receiver. But those guys, it's tough to kind of pick one ahead of the other. Drake London's coming off of what was an ACL, I believe he ended up having.
Ankle, I think it's an ankle.
Or ankle. Excuse me. And he reminds me a little bit of Mike Evans. I mean, that was a pass-happy offense. The way they try to get him the football. There's a special player, a tough player. It's going to be interesting to see how he runs because I think he could end up being like a 4.50, low 4.5 guy.
That's
at least
fine.
just from watching him on tape. But he's a heck of a player. Jordan Addison, Blitnikoff finals to Pitt, has a ton of production, ton of yards. Another guy who I think when you look at his ability to run routes and be able to separate and get open, he's been a big piece of the success for Kenny Pickett. And probably one of my favorite kind of gadget guys, and not a first-round guy by any means, but somewhere in the middle rounds is Wan'Dale Robinson, originally started at Nebraska, now at Kentucky. The variety of ways in which they use him almost reminds me a little bit of like Ray McLeod out of Clemson.
Yeah.
He just could do a bunch of different things, and he'll continually, stay on rosters and have an opportunity to play a long time in the NFL because of that speed, twitchiness, and versatility. So that's just some of the few, but I would be loving it, being a quarterback in the league where you could find a first round to probably even the sixth round of wide receivers who are going to come in and maybe help you out in some capacity.
Well, that's the thing. I'm looking at last year's draft class. They had 35 receivers go in the draft. And that's bonkers. And you talk about guys that may not be first rounders. Josh Palmer's a third rounder, had struggled at Tennessee because he had no one to throw the ball. Turns out when Justin Herbert's throwing the ball, he's actually pretty good. And to Prisco's credit, that was one of his guys. I wasn't sure about. You mentioned Amon-Ra St. Brown earlier.
Velus Jones falls into that category, right? Hendon Hooker, who's taken over now at Tennessee, has done a good job. Velus Jones is one of those guys that keep your eye on him. Former USC kid, goes to Tennessee. You see some of that flash and ability. Like when I was watching Palmer last year, you'd see Jones flash a little bit too, and you're like, all right, this kid can do some things too. So I'm telling you, it is as deep of a draft. It's probably the best position of any position in the draft is that wide receiver spot. I don't know if we'll get 7 drafted in the first round, but you could make a case based on the grades for those wide receivers, at least in my opinion. There's probably 7 worthy, maybe even 8 of being first round grades.
So my latest mock draft, I have 6. And here's the other thing, and you know this, Brady. I mean, people get mad at me if I don't have all their favorite players in the first round. But if you're drafting 35 wide receivers out of the 250-something draft picks, you don't have to take one in the first round. So I had Garrett Wilson's my wide receiver 1 as we sit here. Then I had Jameson Williams go in the middle of the first round to your Browns. I think that makes some sense if everyone can stay healthy. Drake London, who I love. Treylon Burks, who went off against Alabama, and he was playing injured. And he feels like a boom or bust guy, but he's been booming a lot. I'll give him credit. It's so hard to sort of project. I mean, we talk about the draft class not this past years, but the year before that. Justin Jefferson was the 5th wide receiver taken. And, we make fun of Debo because the pick before, like the Vikings were cheering because the Eagles took Jalen Reagor. I mean, they could have had JJ along with Devontae.
Again, from watching Reagor and then watching Jefferson, like clearly you saw the ability of both. Obviously, the Jefferson, pick ends up being able to prove out. But like Reagor was the type of guy that had elite track speed. Yep. He was a returner, big playability during his time at TCU. Just never had a Joe Burrow at quarterback. So, and not saying that Jalen Hurts isn't Joe Burrow, but he doesn't have that sort of ability. So he hasn't developed into that. But no, to your point, I mean, Burks is the type of player that I love the fact that he's really the only guy they have in the passing game that they rely on consistently. He still separates. He still gets open. He's tough as far as getting yards after contact or after the catch. I'm curious to see what his 40 time will be, but
he was running away from guys.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Is when you watch him on tape, you're like, all right, well, they're not catching him, and he's getting separation. But again, we'll see once they get to the combine, they start stacking them up. There's few guys who have, at least based on tape, that combination of size, speed, and what he's able to showcase in some of the highlights.
Yeah, no, he's been fun, and that Arkansas team has actually been sort of fun to watch too. So yeah, I have 6 guys going. A position I don't have going, and you mentioned this running back who I actually like a lot, Isaiah Spiller. Yeah. He's playing on a Texas A&M team that obviously doesn't have Kellen Mond, but hey, man, they beat Alabama, and they're finding ways to win football games. Their defense is really good. They have some guys on offense, including Weidermeyer, the tight end, including Kenyon Green, the offensive lineman who can play guard or tackle. And
Anais Smith, he kind of pitches in a little bit too in the receiving game.
Yep, and they have the other running back who runs like a 4-1, it feels
Devon
like.
A-Chain.
Yeah, good Lord. He was fun to watch in that Alabama game as well. What do you think about Isaiah Spiller in terms of translatability, those skills that we see now on Sundays?
Yeah, I mean, he's the most complete back, I think, when you're looking at this class and his entire skill set. I mean, they basically play with either a new starter in Haynes King or then Zach Calzada, who was just awful when he first took over, and then he's continued to play better since. But no, I mean, in all seriousness, they've been loading the box to stop him. And they've had a hard time of stopping the combination of Spiller or A-Chain for that matter. So credit, obviously, the A&M offensive line, but it's also been getting, tough yards after contact and making guys miss. And so you see that, obviously, the running ability. I think also the thing that kind of makes me have a lot of optimism for what he could be is he's capable in the passing game, whether it's a screen or check down, things like that. He's capable catcher. He's fine in pass protection. So he really is that complete back. Depending on what he runs as a 40, maybe he's somewhere in the background for a team that's looking for that and prioritizes him where that position really needs it. But, look, we know how this works. It's the draft. It's hard for teams to want to invest that significant, 4-year with a 5th-year option deal into a running back at this point. So it's really has nothing to do with his ability. It just has to do with the league and where this league's going at being more of a passing league. But he, to me, is the top of the list. He's the one that I've really enjoyed watching when you turn on the tape and how he's been able to carry the football. I mean, Kenneth Walker, obviously, is the other one who's draft eligible. Makes a lot of sense there. They don't utilize him quite as much in the passing game. You'll see it, screens, check downs, those sorts of things as well. But he's the type of back, too. Curious to see his 40 time because he seems quicker than fast. But yards after contact, man, he's been basically, if you want to call it that, yak, right? He's been like the yak leader this year when you look at how many yards he's been able to gain after initially getting hit. So he's another one that I think, there's a Heisman, was in the Heisman race for a reason because he's really carried that offense this season.
Yeah, Wake Forest transfer, which is sort of curious. You have to leave Wake Forest. They run that sort of weird slow mesh offense.
It's I like to call it a slow RPO. I don't know how they phrase it, but it's definitely not conducive for anyone involved, to what you're going to be asked to do at the next level. And it was like, and they have a couple solid running backs there too. It's not like those guys aren't capable. He probably just didn't want to have to share carries, and he found himself somewhere with Mel Tucker where he's going to be the highlighted player. And now you see why. I mean, he's been able to show up on some big stages.
Yeah, that's right. And sort of talking about we had this conversation all the time, first round, second round situation for running backs. I mean, don't forget, Jonathan Taylor was the 41st player taken. He might be the best player in the NFL right now as we sit here. And there were a run of running backs 2 years ago in the draft in second round. DeAndre Swift and Jonathan Taylor went off the board. Cam Akers, who's injured. J.K. Dobbins, who's also injured. A.J. Dillon, who was drafted instead of a wide receiver in Green Bay, but who's playing well now. So that seems to be the sweet spot of when you get these running backs. Last year, Javonte Williams went in the second round.
The last thing I'll say, too, is just when you look at the size of Spiller at 6'1", 215 pounds, if you went right now and looked at the leading rushers in the NFL and you looked at their size, like height, weight, and all that, they tend to be bigger guys. They tend to be around more of like Isaiah Spiller's size. You need that sort of extra padding, extra durability and all that. Devon Achane, another player we had talked about for A&M, not draft eligible at this point, but he's 5'9", 185. So he's explosive. He's able to get it done at the college level. They play less games, maybe less wear and tear, sharing carries. But at the NFL level, he's not going to be able to be like a bell cow. Spiller can be more something closer to a 3-down back or that bell cow, given his skill set, but also given his size and just ability to be able to handle that amount of carries.
Yeah. Also in that vein, Breece Hall, Iowa State, 6'1", 220. And then Brian Robinson, who's going to get drafted at Alabama, 6'1", 225.
I'll say that Brian. I'm thinking Bijan Robinson's another running back that I thought, if a good year, may have came out from Texas, but now it's looking like, well, actually, I don't even know if he's technically eligible yet. I think he might still have one more year.
He may have one more year.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, running backs are important. We're finding that out. They're just almost certainly not going to go in round one. I mean, Najee Harris is definitely a round one pick, and I joke about this every week. Brady, the lifespan in his career is about a year and a half because there's no offensive line, and he gets hit behind the line of scrimmage every time. He's dragging guys 2 or 3 yards, and that is not a recipe for a sustained career. All right, what else we got here? Let's see. Tight ends. So I love this guy. We don't hear a lot about him because, people typically don't stay up till 10:30 in the East Coast to watch Nevada football games. But Cole Turner is the tight end for Carson Strong. And Romeo Doubs is the wide receiver who plays there as well. I think Cole Turner's had a better season than Romeo Doubs. You like Cole Turner?
I do, as far as kind of that pass catching, tight end, 6'6", 240 pounds. He can split out. He can do a lot of things. He's got great body control for that catch radius and that size. A guy's gone over, 650 yards receiving this year so far, but that's the guy who kind of pops. It's funny. You're watching Carson Strong on tape and you're like, hey, who's this number 19 with the long hair, long flowing locks out there making these plays? And you're like, oh, it's their tight end, Cole Turner. So a lot of times that's how you kind of come on to like some of these players, but he's not a first round guy. Obviously, I don't know that we have any tight ends that are going to be going to the first round. But he is a guy who I think you look at and say, he could be kind of that 3rd round, 4th round guy that's going to go in and have an immediate impact and surprise a lot of people with his skill set and ability. And then the other tight end that I love, absolutely love, is Charlie Kolar out of Iowa State. At 6'6", 260, he has all the ability to be your traditional Y tight end position, meaning run blocking at the point of attack. You can run to his side. He's not, it's not on the backside for like a backside cutoff, right, where you try to hide the guy who can't really block or isn't willing to block. But he's also got that, for that size, he'll put him out wide and he'll run some double moves. He runs some routes like he's a wide receiver. He'll go up and high point the football well. He's kind of got it all. It's just he's not going to be the type of guy that separates. He's not blessed with a ton of speed like that. But again, you're talking a 6'6", 260-pound dude who can move some people off the ball. So Kolar's another guy that, again, not a first-round pick, but I love watching him on tape. I think he's a reliable target for Brock Purdy this year. And when they have to go to him, they try to go to him. And hell, it basically was the final drive that Iowa State had this past week. It was Charlie Kolar until they finally decided to double team him, which, again, I think if you're an Oklahoma fan, you're probably questioning why it took them so long on that drive, let him drive down the field. But he's another guy to keep an eye on.
You know what? You bring up a good point. And I think sometimes we fall in love with the Evan Ingram type tight ends, and sometimes they don't work out, either lack of toughness or whatever, and that's not a reflection of Evan Ingram, just typically speaking in generalities. How important, if you run a 4.75, which I think is what TJ Hawkinson ran, I don't think that's an issue as a tight end, especially, and you sort of fill in the details from here. This is just me trying to put the pieces together. If you're facing zone defenses in the middle of the field, cover 2 or whatever, you can find the holes in the zone and just sit down in those zones, whether you run a 4.2 or a 4.8. And if you're a big fat target, it's a lot easier to hit that target with people, say, 8 to 10 yards on either side of you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no. I think when you've got a traditional wide tight end, that guy a lot more oftentimes is going to be impactful in your play action pass because, you're a lot of what you're doing is going to mimic. So it's going to be a hard matchup for those linebackers and tight ends because and safeties, because their eyes are going to be looking for a run. And then you've got this tight end who kind of slips by them. So it's a little easier schematically. And I think even formationally at times, when you've got a capable blocker at the tight end spot to be able to formulate some things to get him some open space, get him some free space. And then you talk about the size advantage. You're not going to find too many tight ends that are going to be blessed with that combination of size and speed. It's just a rarity. And so when you do, sure. But if you're going to put that guy outside as a wide receiver and he runs a 4.5, all right, that's great. He's got a size advantage and he's pretty fast. But you're getting wide receivers now, by the boatload that run a 4.4 that can go out and create separation and be even a little bit faster and get that job done. So I don't know that I see it as quite as much as an advantage as I used to. Like, we're going to talk about a cornerback that's in this year's draft. It's one of my favorite cornerbacks. He's 6'3", 200 pounds. I mean, now what beats that cornerback? It's not a 6'5", 6'6", 240-pound fast guy at tight end out there. It's a guy who's like a 4.3 speed guy. Because that cornerback, Jahan Dotson, for example, who's probably a 4.4, 4.3 guy when it's all said and done. He's smaller in size, but good luck trying to get a hand on him. I mean, no different than Tyreek Hill. Now, I don't think he's Tyreek Hill speed, but he'll be fast. So I just think when you look at offenses and like what they're ultimately really looking for, as much as everyone's looking for like that guy that you can put out there and he can be a mismatch because he's fast on a linebacker, but he's got that size on a cornerback, they're just really rare. And I think sometimes you overlook that traditional tight end who can do so many things for you, and as you said, be better in zone coverage, or still be able to beat that linebacker in man-to-man or sometimes safety, depending on who that is.
Right. Yeah, and I think we fall in love with speed, and I get all that, and it's exciting when you see it, but it doesn't always translate, it feels like, from college to the NFL. All right, let's move to the offensive line, and one of your favorite guys is one of my favorite guys, in Tyler Linderbaum, and I bring this up every time we talk about centers. Since 2010, only 3 centers have gone no higher than 18th. Ryan Kelly, Princess Guy, Garrett Bradbury, and Marquise Pouncey. They all went 18th, none higher than that. And you could argue that Marquise Pouncey is perhaps should have gone higher, whatever, based on his career. Tyler Linderbaum, to me, feels like a top 10 pick. And before you talk about him and the other offensive linemen you love in this class, how is this for a quick fix for the Giants who just fired, it looks like, Jason Garrett? So they have the 5th pick and the 7th pick. Let's say at number 5, Ike Ekwuanu's there, the tackle from NC State who can play tackle. He's incredibly athletic. I think he was on your buddy Bruce Feldman's freak list to start the year, rightly so. And then at 7, they circle back and take Tyler Linderbaum. Boom, offensive line fixed. What do you think of that?
I don't hate it. I think the problem is who's making the picks, right? Is it David Gettleman or is he fired too? Because isn't he the one who brought in Nate Solder and Will Hernandez in the 2nd round and all these other players that haven't really been what they thought? I mean, the initial reviews of Andrew Thomas were bad, but I think he's rounding form into what they were hoping he'd be, even catching touchdown passes of late.
Yeah, amazing.
I don't hate it. I mean, look, I think one of the reasons why the position isn't prioritized is because there's enough players in the interior now on the offensive line that they feel like can slide down and play that position because you're not snapping. It's very seldom now. You're shotgun snapping more than anything else, and they feel like it's a little easier to kind of throw the ball back there and then and punch than to have to secure it when you're snapping back there and punch, right? Like there's a little bit more to that, I think, and more stress to that. So there might be a little bit of thought there with that. And just the fact that, again, more inside guards, they feel like, oh, if you snap before, cool, okay, he can do it. And they're just not going to prioritize as much. Lindenbaum would be the exception. I just think no matter where you want to put him, he's going to be one of your better interior offensive linemen. He's athletic, he can move, he's smart. Technique-wise, he's pretty much flawless.
Wrestler.
And so he's a former wrestler, so he understands leverage. As far as pad level and all that, I just don't really see many flaws in his game. And I think when you look at what their offense does traditionally and what they pump out, he'll be prepared to start day one at center for whatever team would draft him. So don't hate that idea if you're trying to rebuild that offensive line. I don't know who's the one who's drafting him. If David Gettleman's still there, and obviously Jason Garrett's not the one calling plays for him anymore.
Right. No, that's right. Also, fun fact, Tyler Linderbaum beat Tristan Wirfs in, I think, a state wrestling match. And I think maybe Wirfs came back and won. I think they're 1-1, but the fact that he beat him, they're obviously a few years apart. Because Tristan Wirfs is one of the best athletes in the NFL, and he's an offensive tackle who can jump out of a pool, which is, again, can you jump out of a pool, Brady?
I've never tried to. I usually am jumping in. It's a little easier that way. Yeah.
I bet Debo could jump out of a pool. I feel like he can. All right, let's talk about one of these other offensive linemen. You can take your pick out of the list you have here. Darian Kennard, who's a grown man. Thayer Mumford, you mentioned, kicked inside. And then Jason Kirkland, who's played well this year against some pretty good competition.
Yeah, I mean, Mumford's the one that's interesting to me because I think if you looked at him, like he was obviously a guy who's going to get drafted, probably more as a tackle. But, he may have helped himself by, I think, sliding down and playing inside this year. Some of that may have been a byproduct of them just wanting to get their best 5 out there on the field. Because I still think he looks like a tackle playing guard, but he's shown the versatility this year. I think there's some teams that may look him as that now that they've watched him on film, because even for his size, and he's pretty massive, he can move well enough to basically go in there and play guard. So he's a guy who I think has helped himself a lot this year. Won't necessarily be tested quite as much this week versus Michigan. The edges are tested a lot more with Ojabo and Hutchinson, but still the different things they do, they'll be tested to a degree. I think it's really the Big Ten championship game to see if he gets any movement, in particular up front on that Wisconsin defensive line. That's the group that, you look at them, they're the number one rush defense in the country. They don't let anyone get any movement. It's a stalemate at best for most offensive lines. And they create a lot of 5-on-5, a lot of one-on-ones up front, and they use a lot of different games and stunts. So that game, I think, will tell us a lot about where he's at as far as an interior offensive lineman player, or if maybe a team looks at him and says, "Oh, well, let's kick him back out the tackle." But he's a guy that's caught my eye this year, and I think just again, it's hard to find big, massive human beings that can move the way he can.
Yeah, we talk about quarterbacks getting overdrafted. Offensive linemen get overdrafted too, because obviously you need them. So whenever I'm going through this whole process, and this will be my fourth draft, if I feel like a guy's going to go to the third round, he typically ends up going a half round, a round higher, because you just need these guys. And, it's a crapshoot, just like every other position. You hope your coaching can get the best out of these kids. You hope they grow into the roles and get stronger and so on and so forth. And Mumford, I think you're right, probably did himself some favors in terms of his NFL future by kicking inside. He can play guard. There's the versatility if you need him in a pinch, swing tackle type situation. So you mentioned Ohio State, Michigan. That's going to be a fun game this weekend. And I know you might be the only person that loves Michigan's defense more than I do. And it starts with the front four. Who are your two dudes up there that you like?
Yeah, David Ojabo and Aiden Hutchinson. You obviously have been doing this, paying attention to this. Did you have either of those guys being first-round picks at the beginning of the year? Maybe Hutchinson, but he was coming off an injury, so who really knew?
He didn't play well in 2019 when he was getting talked up, and last year was a COVID year. I didn't love him, and this year he has done a 180.
No, 100%. So I think those guys have probably done as much for themselves and their draft stock than any player in any position anywhere. Because now you've got people looking at them seriously and trying to make the case. All right, is it Hutchinson? Is it Ojabo? Is one complementing the other? Look, they're both just damn good. Hutchinson's that type of guy. We've talked before. I think I compared him to Jared Allen, just from his size, frame, and motor. He's just, never takes a playoff. Never takes a playoff. I love watching that dude, because the effort he gives, it doesn't matter if it's a run, away, pass, whatever, and who's on him. He's fighting every snap, man.
Every snap.
Ojabo's sneaky, bendy too. He's the type of guy, because he's twitchy, and you don't always see guys who are really twitchy like that who can bend, but he's slick. And I think one of the more, I was actually watching today versus Penn State, and he ended up literally, it was so quick because he had a nice jump off the line, and it was just kind of a little quick dip, and then he just almost poked his hand out the ball and literally knocked it out of Clifford's hands as he was starting to bring it up for a sack fumble. And I'm watching going, dang. Everything about that was impressive as far as what he showcases. So he's another guy that I just think you look at him, I wouldn't be shocked if you went in the first round. I think the only reservations you have with him are a little bit raw, first year breaking out, those sorts of things. But, to me, both those players have done more than probably anyone else at any position to improve their draft stock. Maybe outside of Kenny Pickett, because I guess now that I think about it, he's the one that. Well, no one had him as a first-round pick coming into the year.
Nobody.
And I've watched him for years, and I kept trying to tell other people. I said, "Hey, there's something about this kid. There's something about this kid. I'm telling you, there's something about him."
He's a gamer.
Finally, he took off, man. No, he finally took off.
Yeah, Ojabo reminds me, not quite the athlete, but in terms of the flying under the radar as we get to this sort of point in the draft process of Odafe Owe, who that's fair. No sacks last year. And I remember I would do radio hits every week, and people would laugh at me you're going to have our team taking a guy who wasn't drafted, who hasn't had any sacks. And I remember talking to scouts going, don't worry about that. This kid doesn't even know how good he is. He still thinks, I had a scout tell me he still thinks he's 6'1", 215 and playing basketball. He doesn't know that he's 6'3" or 6'4", 250 and as explosive as he is. And Ojabo, to your point, is raw. He's a junior. He has 10 sacks. And some of that's Hutchinson.
Whoa. Kind of like Frank Clark too. That's who Ojabo kind of reminds me of as far as how he moves. And obviously both have to be Michigan guys, but Frank Clark's the guy I kind of look at him all right, he didn't run a great 40 time, and just kind of watched him as he got drafted. He ended up being a second round pick, but he obviously was able to make that big time money. Once he got into the league. But I see some of those similarities too with Ojabo. I think what Frank Clark's game looks like. And I'm trying to look up their size wise. I mean, I think Ajaba's maybe a little taller and longer than Clark, who's like 6'3".
Yeah, Ajaba's what 6'5", 255-ish, I think is what he's listed at. So if Brady Quinn's doing the measurements, he's probably 6 feet, 5'11". All right, let's move on here. Oh, by the way, quickly, Justin Ross is number 12. Their inside off-ball linebacker. That guy is good. Daxton Hill, the safety, has first-round talent. That is a really good defense. Yeah,
well,
for sure.
Let me just say this too about the edge guys. Jermaine Johnson at Florida State.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to
leads the ACC. Okay,
I was gonna go to your. Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. No, I was just saying, like, that's another guy that, again, helped this draft stop big time. Left Georgia, goes to Florida State, immediate starter from game 1 this year versus Notre Dame. He popped, and then you see him really the rest of the year. Now he leads the ACC in sacks. He's a guy that could potentially be back in the first round, depending on how teams are looking at him. But Trayvon Walker, I don't know if you want to call him an edge player. He's almost so big and then freaky athletic.
275-ish.
Yeah, I mean, he might end up moving down inside as like a 3 tech. But especially on passing situations when you're going to get that, that faster group in there. But I kind of sit there and I just go, all right, I'm telling you, Walker may end up being a first-round pick. I think it'll go higher than people realize.
Yeah, I mean, that defense is bonkers. I was talking about the Michigan defense. Like the Georgia defense is legit. Feels like we say it all the time. I'm sort of joking. The NFL defense. So I just sent you a note, Brady. We were talking about Jermaine Johnson. I sent it to Debo, but we can't show it for YouTube rights purposes. It's Jermaine Johnson against Miami, where he spun
Zion Nelson.
Spun the right tackle. I don't know if that's Zion. Don't put that on Zion Nelson. I think Zion Nelson's number 60. He spun the right tackle like a top.
I can't tell based on this. It's small on my screen.
And it is like I've never seen anything like this. He is so strong and so quick off the ball that the right tackle gets his arm in the wrong position and he turns him around and corkscrews him to the ground and strip sack fumble. Great play by Jermaine Johnson, as you mentioned. And much like maybe the Jameson Williams situation, you just leave Georgia to have a chance to play, and then it turns out you're a guy that's really
Jared
good.
Williams, by the way, was actually 62, and he's a Houston transfer, but he just did quick work on him, and that was it. So.
I've never seen that before, so that gets your attention. I don't have him as a first round pick yet. I like what I saw. I mean, he looks the part. And a lot of times when you watch these guys and they're hyped up, and you watch him and you go, okay, well, he's not doing anything. He disappears for a series or two, and then he'll flash. And then we talked about guys like Hutchinson who are just their motors at 10 the whole time. Like Hutchinson's where you want to be, and then people tend to fall somewhere below that. Jermaine Johnson has a pretty good motor. He gets after it. He's strong. He's not getting stymied a lot of the line of scrimmage, and he sort of impacts plays, and that's what you want to see in trying to figure out, what this may look like in 2 or 3 or 4 years. All right, 2 more guys here before we get to one more guy, then we'll get to the secondary. And I love this guy too, Devin Lloyd. Undersized linebacker, but I mean, who cares? These are off-ball linebackers who come into the league weighing between 220 and 235, it feels like.
Remember Jordan Brooks from Texas Tech? That's who he reminds me of. And maybe it's just similar colors. But I think when you look at both their games, they do everything. And I think Lloyd might be a little bit smaller than him, but they do everything. He's good against the run. He's good pressuring, I think, in particular. He's matched up on backs, getting by, but he's good dropping into pass coverage. Impacting plays, trying to get his hands on the football. So very productive player. That's who my comp would be for him. I think he's one of the most complete players in this year's draft. When you look at the tape, at least, the hard thing is just he plays for a team that plays late at night. Not a lot of people see him. So I'm sure the scouts and everyone's doing their best to watch him. But outside of playing an inside linebacker and being at that position where he's not like Micah Parsons, he's not going to move on the edge and be able to rush like Parsons has been. So that's the promise. He's going to end up being a guy that ends up going second, third round. I don't think in the end of the back end of the first like Jordan Brooks did, but maybe he's a heck of a player.
He's my number 2 linebacker right now behind Nakobe Dean, and Nakobe Dean is incredible. He's just so much fun. Christian Harris, again, and we sort of talked about this in recent mock draft shows. This linebacker situation at Alabama, they always come in overhyped, and they I don't want to say underdeliver, but he hasn't quite lived up to the hype yet. Hopefully, he turns things around. Whatever, goes in the first round if that's his fate, but it just hasn't been there. Mac Wilson a few years ago, day 3 pick for the Browns, and then
I feel like their interior players, they miss Christian Barmore a lot, who's been great for New England this year.
Absolutely,
that's one of the things that has stood out to me. Is as much as we want to compliment Will Anderson Jr. and how he pops on film, you don't quite see that from the interior players there at Bama.
That's right. Phildarian Mathis is a guy that I know teams like, but he's a day 3 guy probably. But he's a great locker room guy. He's not Christian Barmore. He's not Quentin Williams. But that's a good point. All right, we got to get to your guy here, Kyle Hamilton. Tell me one bad thing about Kyle Hamilton. Just one thing that troubles you.
I don't know that he's done growing. Like,
That's
so
not
he
bad.
walked into the room. He walked into the room when we were there before the Notre Dame Wisconsin game, and I was just like, "What?" Like, they make people who like are as tall and as long as you. Like, I think he's listed at what 6'4".
Yeah, 220-ish.
He looked like he was 6'6", 230, and I was like, "Gosh, he's a baby. Like, he still can fill into it. Like he kind. I mean, I saw Isaiah Simmons in person." And he was obviously had a little more weight or beef on him.
Right.
But I was looking at him thinking, the only concern I have is someone going to mess this up and try to fit him into a box
Right.
and make him play one position and not utilize him in this guy who could play the deep middle, who can match up man-to-man versus, those tight ends, he can go outside and you can disguise your coverage and let him play cornerback and let him have the deep third. Or however, whatever you want to do with him, he can do everything. You put him in the box, he'll tackle. His ball skills are unbelievable and just a knack for the game. Like, that's the only thing is he's kind of one of those guys that's so big, so athletic, and so good that, does someone mess up just trying to fit him into a box and just instead of trying to like orchestrate their defense around him? Like, I know it sounds funny to say, but like I remember talking to Vance Joseph, the defensive coordinator out the Arizona Cardinals before one of the games I was calling when Isaiah Simmons was a rookie. And he was like, well, you'll see him more in base, but then we won't put him in there in nickel because he's still trying to learn the defense. And I'm just like, no, like, come on, dude. Like, I understand, like, there's different principles and you have base principles and everything as far as how you're going to play as a linebacker when you're in a base scheme versus a nickel scheme. But he's the type of guy that's like, dude, he's going to be on the field. He should be on the field for every snap. He's too good. He's too athletic, all stuff. And I think early on, like you saw him get beat. I want to say it was Raheem Mostert beat him on like a Texas route versus the 49ers in his rookie year. And everyone's like, oh, he's not ready. He wasn't ready. I'm like, no, it's just he's young. He's inexperienced. He's still, getting this down. But like that's an example of like a player that I got to be honest with you. I don't know that they're utilizing him even as good as he can be. Right now because of what their system is. So that's my only concern for Kyle Hamilton is does a coach mess it up at the next
I don't even know
he's that good.
What the comp is. I'm trying to think like maybe Minka, like Minka type player.
He's way bigger than Minka.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think in terms of responsibilities. I mean, Minka's asked to do a lot in Pittsburgh, which is deep safety guy who can sort of move all over the place. But you're right. I think overthinking it because you have this special sort of chess piece and then you end up asking him to do too much where it should be pretty straightforward. Can you play free safety as a rookie in the NFL with all the responsibilities that come with it? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I think so. He's going to be smart enough to get him lined up, so that shouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
But like I said, I mean, so Isaiah Simmons is 6 foot, 238, 240? 6'4", 238, 240.
Yeah, no, that sounds right.
Like Hamilton can't be that far off from that. I'm telling you right now. And he's a baby. Like we're talking about a guy who's 21 years old?
I think he's 20.
He's 20. There you go. Like he's only going to put on more weight, more muscle. So he might find himself end up playing linebacker, like that kind of hinge player that's over the slot but kind of plays in the box and all that. And then you can utilize him from there either to match up or he can drop back and do some different things with him, especially in your nickel dime packages. So that's the only thing that I think is going to end up happening, is just because he's so big and he's still so athletic for his size.
Yeah, I mean that gets you juiced up if you're picking a top 5, top 7, and you need someone because I mean those guys don't come around. They come around every 20 years. All right, we'll end on this guy, Brady, and you mentioned him earlier. Sauce Gardner, Ahmad Gardner out of Cincinnati. That's a really good team too, by the way. Obviously, you watch Desmond Ridder in the offense, and they're top 5 now, I think, and they're making their case to be considered a legit program, and they probably should be considered that, but I don't make the rules. But what do you think of Sauce Gardner? And opposite him is Kobe Bryant, another kid who's probably going to get drafted as well, playing cornerback.
I mean, I'll just say this. I look at him, and he is my favorite cornerback to watch in this draft class. Stingley, when he was playing this year, I don't think he had the year that people were hoping he'd have. Now, prior to this year, I think you'd say he's probably one of the best cornerbacks, but Ahmad Gardner, or Sauce as they call him, he's 6'3", 200 pounds. He can play physical at the line of scrimmage. He can still recover and be able to make up ground. He's got great ball skills. I don't even see teams really testing him quite as much. Now, Houston might try to in the AAC championship game, but I don't think they play East Carolina this week. I don't think that's going to be much of a challenge for them. But I just kind of look at it and say, like, if I'm looking for a first-round cornerback, a guy that I feel like I can put out on an island, he's got the demeanor. He's got everything to it. And you can maybe question, like, well, he's playing on a group of 5 schedule and team and all that stuff. Okay, but, there's still some good wide receivers on their schedule that they face. Whether it's their Notre Dame game, whether you're talking about some of the cats at Houston, SMU, for example, there's still a number of good, talented wide receivers he's going up against. So I don't think the transition will be very hard for him, given his size and skill set.
No, and that's a good point, because unlike even skill position players where you can't really tell. If you watch a cornerback in terms of his movement and his ability to stay in phase and mirror and all the stuff that scouts use, if he can do it, he can do it. If he can't, he can't. If he's stiff-hipped and he has trouble getting out of his breaks and stuff, then he's going to be exposed whether he's playing SEC guys or playing, D2 guys. So I think that's an important point. And when you watch Ahmad Gardner play, he doesn't play like he's 6'3", 200 in terms of his movement. He plays like he's a much smaller, much quicker guy. And I think that
he doesn't
no matter
look
what.
that big on tape, which is
right.
odd. Like he doesn't look like a guy that's like quite that big. So,
all right, that's it, Brady. We went through your list of guys. We talked about the mock draft, the quarterbacks a little bit. Finally, a Brady Quinn football show that brought some substance to the YouTube.
I'm shocked Debo didn't try to chime in and get us talking about Chris Farley at some point. So,
is that Debo's move, Chris Farley? Or is that a Brinson move?
I mean, he came up with a trivia like the following week after it came up haphazardly in conversation. The next thing I know, I'm supposed to like figure out like dating back to his time on Saturday Night Live and all these. I was like, dude, I just like his movies. I wasn't like, I don't stalk the guy.
Debo, are you a huge Chris Farley guy?
No, Brady on one show, made some sort of statement that he was maybe the biggest Chris Farley fan. So then I spun it into some trivia.
Yeah, like I stalked the guy. I was like, no, I really loved his movies. I'd watch Tommy Boy and Black Sheep and Beverly Hills Ninja on like repeat. Dirty Work. I think he played a low key great role in there.
He was
Ryan. What year do you think he debuted on SNL?
Oh, well, he's older than me because he died in 97, I think. So he probably debuted SNL. I was so it may have been like 90. I'm going to say 93, 94.
Earlier, 91.
Okay. So I was trying to do the math whether he was on there when I was in college. And don't forget, Brady, he played the bus driver in Billy Madison.
That's right. He did.
That is one fine piece of, you know what? You can't say that anymore, Debo.
You can't say anything anymore.
So. No, you can't say anything anymore, including time limits. Brady, it was good to see you. Great to hang out and talk draft stuff.
Why are you wearing a Syracuse sweatshirt? What's up with that?
I'm representing the Cuse, man.
All right. I mean, that's fine. I mean,
by the way, quick story, Brady. My son's 14 years old and he's like into soccer now. And this is, I don't know if you had this when you were coming up, but maybe you did because you were big time D1 athlete by the time it's all said and done. But like he has his own like speed agility coach now, which is a thing because everyone has it.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a 23-year-old kid who played cornerback at Syracuse who's still trying to get an opportunity. I think get an injury history or something. So, I wear this to support my guy Antoine Cordy. That's why I wear it.
There you go. That's awesome. No, everyone needs a speed agility coach guy. Yeah.
Did you have one of those?
Mike Durant. Yeah, Mike Durant was like my strength coach. Speed agility, all that kind of stuff.
So like 2003, 2004, like in high school or before?
No, before that in high school. Yeah. I mean, it was more like 8th grade into my freshman year.
Okay. All right.
Was when we started to kind of like get into like training hard like that. So.
Oh, okay. I didn't know I didn't know when that became a thing, quote unquote. So
in Columbus, I mean, look at West Side Barbell, man. Like the strength training industry, the Arnold Expo comes there every year. It's a big thing there. It's huge, like culture of Columbus. Yeah. Rogue Fitness is there. Yeah.
All right. So there you go. All right, Debo, get on that. Get yourself a speed agility coach and you can, we'll talk about that next time. All right. Thanks for joining everyone. What's tomorrow? The pick show is tomorrow, I believe. Debo, is that right?
Yeah, we'll have Thanksgiving picks in the feed and then week 12 picks coming up later.
Nice.
And then we'll be back. Brady, you won't be there because you'll be enjoying yourself, but we will have a post-Thanksgiving podcast with me, Brinson, and Breach. Until then, thank you, everybody. Peace out.